In Britain, there's a moment that happens in almost every home visit, and it happens fast. The door opens, coats come off, someone steps inside, bringing the outside world with them. Cold air, rain, street noise, travel. And then, almost immediately, comes the question. Not, how was the traffic? Not, what's new? But the real British greeting. Do you want a cup of tea? Because for decades, especially in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, British hospitality ran on a set of unwritten rules. Not fancy rules, not posh etiquette, practical, emotional rules that made a visit feel safe and normal. Rules that said, you're welcome here. Sit down. Warm up. We'll make this easy. And the funniest part is, the rules weren't only about what you offered. They were about the rhythm of the whole visit. What you said, what you didn't say, where people sat, how long they stayed, and how everyone pretended it was effortless, even when the host was silently panicking in the kitchen. So today, we're going through the real rules of British guests, what you offered the moment someone arrived, and why it mattered so much. The first rule begins before the visitor even steps inside. 1. You don't let people hover at the door. British homes often had cold hallways, damp coats, narrow spaces, and the doorway was not a social zone. So the first instinct was to move people in quickly. Come in, come in. Not dramatic, just automatic, because leaving someone half in, half out felt rude, and it wasn't only politeness, it was practical. You didn't want the cold air coming in. You didn't want the door left open, so you bring them inside fast, and immediately you move to the next rule. 2. Coat off, bag down, make them physically comfortable. The host would usually gesture to the coat hooks, the chair, the hallway space, often without saying much, because a visit wasn't supposed to feel tense. And in a Britain that was colder indoors than modern people expect, the first job was always the same: warm the person up. Which leads to the most important offering of all. 3. Tea is the default offer. Almost before hello is finished, tea was the universal reset button. It warmed hands. It slowed the pace. It created a reason to sit down. It gave the host something to do so the visit had structure. And here's the key. In many homes, you didn't offer tea because the guest was thirsty. You offered tea because the guest had arrived. It was the ritual that turned someone at the door into someone visiting. Even if the guest didn't want it, the offer still mattered, because it signalled hospitality. So the question wasn't only, do you want tea? It was, do you want to be welcomed? 4. And you don't just offer tea, you offer a choice, even if there isn't much choice. This is a classic British move. Tea or coffee? Even if the coffee was instant, even if the answer was obviously tea, even if the household didn't truly have a cafe menu. Offering a choice was part of the politeness. It made the guest feel considered, and sometimes there was the third option, said with a little apology, or I've got squash, especially if kids were visiting. 5. You offer biscuits, but you don't pressure. Now we enter the sacred territory of British visiting. Biscuits. In many homes, tea without biscuits felt incomplete. But there's a rule inside the rule. You offer, but you don't make it awkward. So it goes like this. Do you want a biscuit? Guest says, oh no, I'm fine. Host says, go on. Guest says, no, really. Host says, just one. And then the guest finally takes one because the performance must be completed. This polite refusal ritual was a way of avoiding greed, avoiding embarrassment, and keeping everything soft. It wasn't efficient, but it was socially smooth, and the biscuits weren't fancy. Often they were the classics: digestives, custard creams, bourbons, rich tea, simple, normal, reliable. 6. If it's a proper visit, you put something out. If someone was coming round for more than 10 minutes, especially family, neighbours, close friends, The host often put out a small plate, not because it was a party, because a proper visit deserved a little offering. Cake, if there was any. Slices of something simple, sometimes sandwiches if it was lunchtime, sometimes jam on toast if it was informal, sometimes just more biscuits than usual. It didn't have to be impressive. It had to show effort, because effort is the currency of British hospitality. 7. The guest is offered the best seat, but nobody says it out loud. Older British living rooms often had an unspoken seating map. A dad chair, a mum chair, a best chair. When guests arrived, the host would usually offer a comfortable place, often the best available seat, without making it a formal ceremony. You'd hear things like, "Sit there," "Make yourself comfortable." But the truth is, the host was quietly managing the room, because seating in Britain wasn't random. It was a signal of respect. 8. Make yourself at home, is said, but it doesn't mean literally. This is one of the funniest British contradictions. The host says, "Make yourself at home," but the guest knows. Don't actually behave like you live here. You don't open cupboards. You don't help yourself to food without asking. You don't walk into rooms uninvited. You don't start rearranging anything. You don't put your feet up unless you're very close family, and even then you read the room. Make yourself at home means relax, don't feel judged, but also remember you're a guest. British comfort always had boundaries. 9. You don't show up empty-handed if it's not a casual pop-in. For close family or a planned visit, it was common to bring something small, not expensive. A tin of biscuits, a box of chocolates, a cake, sometimes flowers, sometimes something for the kids. It wasn't required in every case, but it was a strong cultural habit, because turning up with a small offering said, "I respect your effort. I'm not here to take, I'm here to share." 10. The host pretends the house is normal, even if they cleaned for hours. This is essential. British hosting often involved intense preparation, followed by pretending no preparation happened. You'd hear lines like, "Sorry about the mess," even when the place was spotless, because admitting you tried too hard could feel embarrassing. So the host downplayed everything while quietly watching for any crisis. Is the kettle boiling? Are there enough mugs? Where are the biscuits? Is the milk enough? Are the kids behaving? Is the room warm? And the guest, if they were polite, played along. Oh, it's lovely, because the visit is a shared performance of making things feel easy. 11. Conversation starts light. Weather, travel, small updates. There was usually a soft opening. Weather, how cold it is, how busy the road was, who's been ill, who's working where. Not because people were shallow, because Britain often warmed up socially the way it warmed up physically, gradually. You didn't walk in and launch into the deepest topic of your life unless the relationship allowed it. The first stage was gentle. 12. If the guest is cold, you increase warmth, subtly. This is very British. The host adjusts the environment without making a big deal. If someone looks cold, turn up the fire a bit, move them closer to the heat, offer another hot drink, offer a blanket in a casual way. But you don't say, "You look freezing, let me rescue you." You do it quietly, because British care often came wrapped in understatement. 13. Refills are offered before the cup is empty. Another classic. You don't wait for the guest to ask. You offer. Another cup? Even if the guest says no, the offer itself is part of the hospitality. And the host often keeps track. Who drinks strong tea? Who wants milk first? Who takes sugar? Who hates sugar? In many homes, the host remembered your tea preferences like it was family knowledge. 14. The guest is not supposed to stay too long unless invited to. This one is very real. British visits often had an unspoken time limit unless the visit was a planned, long one. You could pop in, have tea, chat, then leave. Staying too long could feel like you were imposing, even if nobody said it. So polite guests watched the clock. And polite hosts gave signals, which leads to a legendary British moment. 15. The right, I'll let you get on. Ritual. At some point, someone says, right, and that single word can end a whole visit. Right, I'll let you get on. This doesn't mean the host hates you. It means, we've had a good chat. I respect your time. I'm giving you a polite exit. And often, the goodbye took longer than the whole conversation, because British goodbyes have their own rules. 16. The goodbye is a slow fade, not a sudden cut. You don't usually stand up and instantly leave. There's a winding down. One more sentence, one more laugh, another. Anyway, coats on. A quick word at the door. A final reminder. Give us a ring. Pop in again. And then the door closes, and the house goes quiet. And in that quiet, the host often feels the strange after effect. Relief, warmth, a bit of tiredness, and the knowledge that they did what British homes were expected to do. They hosted properly. Now, why does any of this matter? Because these rules weren't only about politeness. They were a system for keeping social life stable in a world that could be hard. In the 50s, 60s and 70s, many people lived with less comfort than we're used to now. Colder homes, tighter budgets, more routine, less privacy, less personal space in the modern sense. So hospitality became a kind of social glue. Tea, biscuits, a warm seat, gentle conversation, and a respectful goodbye. Simple things, but powerful. And that's why, when people say they miss the old Britain, sometimes what they really miss is this: a culture where turning up at someone's house came with a predictable kindness. Not perfect kindness, not fancy kindness, but reliable kindness. A cup of tea, something small to eat, a warm place to sit, and the feeling that you're welcome, even if nobody makes a big show of it. British guest rules were never about showing off. They were about making people feel safe. And the moment a guest arrived, the home didn't just open its door, it opened a routine. Tea, biscuits, comfort, conversation, and a goodbye that respected everyone's dignity. That's what made those visits memorable. Not because they were glamorous, because they were human.